All right, why don't we go a little local, and gonna go and talk about the war on drugs and prohibition of marijuana, decriminalization, those things, medical marijuana. Today, the representative from Lake Worth introduced in Tallahassee a bill that would legalize medical marijuana in the state of Florida.
Oh,
Now they're saying that it's got long odds. It's got long odds, as the media is saying, which means they're afraid of it. But yeah, it might not pass this time around, but at least get the conversation started. So that's a positive thing that's come out. And in Hawaii, this caught my attention today. In Hawaii, they had five pieces of legislation regarding cannabis on the ballot or on the docket for their legislators, and the Senate in Hawaii passed all five of them. Two of them were passed unanimously, and a couple were passed with only one dissension, and one was passed with two dissensions. So this is 25 senators in the state of Hawaii. 24 of them happen to be Democrats, and one happens to be a Republican. But nevertheless, there were two medical marijuana bills that were passed unanimously. Like I said, two that only had one objection, and one which is probably the decriminal. No, I'm sorry. One that had two no votes, but it wasn't the decriminalization. They had a decriminalization bill that made it like misdemeanor to carry less than an ounce, and that was passed unanimously. So even the Republican there in Hawaii voted for decriminalization, which just makes sense. It's good policy because we shouldn't be locking up productive American citizens for using a plant that grows in the ground, regardless of how you might feel about it as an individual. In a dollars and cents perspective, we lock up way too many of our citizens. We live in a police state now, in that context, because we have the highest prison population of any advanced nation. We are the home of the free, and yet we have 2.6 million people behind bars, over 1% of our population. We have more people in prison in the United States than the People's Republic of China, who reports to only have 1.8 million people behind bars. I don't know how true that is for China, but then again, I also don't know how long people tend to live in prison in China, or how many people are acknowledged to be living in prison in China.
yeah.
But
Prison that's a big industry. That's a very big industry, especially now with privatization.
oh yes,
Yeah, and the government builds the facility, and then Wackenhut or whoever they've become, they go in and they staff it, and it's a private facility at that point, and they charge by the inmates for the course of the month and the year and so on. So there's a big business in locking people up because taxpayers are going to pay for it. It creates jobs. It creates a whole industry, and it gets people off the street.
sure. It does these things, but it's also cancerous on our society. It
Yes,
it destroys families. It ruins people's lives.
that's
It
right.
it is not it's amazing. Let's talk about the Christian ideas about forgiving people. Um, yeah, let's forgive them, but before we forgive them, we're gonna lock them up for 20 years.
Now,
You know,
and you have a difference. You have that violent crime, and you have that the victimless crime, where who did they? You got caught with a bag of weed. Who are you hurting? Oh, no one. So why are you in prison? Because the third
yeah.
time they caught me with it. Did you hurt anyone the first two times? No. Then what are you doing in prison?
Right.
I
Or
don't I don't get it. I just
victimless
I don't
crimes.
see it.
Yeah, or administrative things. I mean, now we have debtors' prisons. People have no jobs, they can't pay their bills, they can't pay their taxes, and now they're going to jail for it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to really think about what it means to our culture to have this massive prison population. The idea that 1% of the population is behind bars, which means that another percent of the population at least is engaged in making sure they stay behind bars in that whole industry. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the far-reaching industry of our justice system, which is not a positive industry. It's a negative thing. It can only feed off of the profit of the producers. You know, it's something that we have to settle our disputes and to keep people, to keep the peace, so to speak. But it's not something that is a, produces wealth in our society. It drains wealth from our society. So we have to really look at and say, can we afford it? Can we afford to keep these many people locked up and not productive and just sponging off of our society? Because I don't think that we can, and especially when it comes to crazy things like sentence like mandatory minimums. You're absolutely right when you talk about crime and the concept of private companies. They build these prisons and then they hire lobbyists to push mandatory minimum sentencing so that they can staff these, fill these prison populations up and make money off of it. It's disgusting because you're not seeing human beings as human beings, and you're not interested in carrying out justice. You're interested in making a buck off of another person's suffering.
And like I said, it destroys lives, it destroys families, and it destroys our society as well. There's nothing good comes from it, nothing at all.